One of the hardest questions to answer with comics is a very basic one. Where do I begin? With so many endless series and years of continuity, finding a starting point can be difficult, but that's where this series comes in. Each week, I look at all the new comics to pick out ongoing series starting new arcs, notable new series, and trade paperbacks and graphic novels being released. Then I finish things up by picking out my pick of the week, the thing I'm most excited about coming out this week. All right, let's start things off by looking at all the new series coming out this week. I usually start this with whatever I think will be the biggest new number one coming out. And this week is a bit difficult. Actually, I think there's a lot of choices, but I ultimately went with Wonder Girl number one because I feel like this is a brand new character that was really kind of established this year. A lot of people are excited about this book. A lot of people did seem to really enjoy the Future State series that came out earlier in the year. And this is continuing that, although continuing that by being a prequel in a way, I'm not sure. But once again, this is written and drawn by Joelle Jones, which is why I'm really excited about it, with art by Jordie Bellaire, who she tends to work with a lot in her career. So when they work together, magic does ensue. And Yora Flor, which is a Brazilian Wonder Woman, although we're finding out in this issue, she comes from Idaho. So this is about her journey, I guess, to become the new Wonder Woman, or whatever title they want to give her. What I really loved about the Future State book is that it had a nice sense of humor to it. There was some interesting story choices in a way. She ended up going into kind of this afterlife, and I don't know, I felt like it was a series that probably could have used some room to breathe, and now they're getting that opportunity, or now Joelle Jones and Jordie Bellaire and the rest of the creative team are getting that opportunity to tell a more complete story. I'm guessing this is an ongoing that doesn't say it's limited series, although sometimes they can be a little bit close to the vest with that stuff, so you're never really sure. And with it being written and drawn by Joelle Jones, like with Catwoman, she was doing everything at first, but eventually she just went to writing duties. My hope is she will do everything, because I tend to enjoy her work the most when she's doing everything. But if they can get a competent artist to come along too, maybe it will work. But ultimately, if you love this character and were a big fan of her earlier series, now you can check this out. Even if you have not read this does seem like it is, taking place well before the Future State book, so it doesn't necessarily matter what you read before. So it's also a great starting point if you just want to read a new DC character. A new week, another new Batman series with Legends of the Dark Knight, number one coming out. Legends of the Dark Knight series, this was a digital first series that is now seeing a physical release. So if you want to read it digitally, you can actually do that the moment this video drops. But if you want the physical version, now it's hitting stores this week. Each issue is going to have a different writer and creative team. This issue with Derek Robinson, and he, of course, did great 90s series like Transmetropolitan and most recently Space Bastards. He also did Hellblazer Rise and Fall earlier this year. So he's a well-established writer and artist, although probably much more known for his art. So how is he as a writer? I don't know, but I would love to see him take on the Batman world, so that's exciting. I have not read this. I usually do read the digital first series, but this is one that I completely missed in the plethora of Batman books that are currently out. With this, Batman Black and White, Batman Urban Legends, Batman the Detective Comics, and Batman. There are a lot of Batman books. I don't think they are going to be running low at any time soon. So now we're getting a new one to the mix. I guess the benefit of this series is that with it being a new creative team, you can kind of jump in at any point and see on, maybe creators that want to be able to go on long runs with the character, at least getting one shot to tell their story. So I guess that is something a little bit different. This, of course, seems to have a lot of iconic heroes and villains in it, where, Penguin, Mr. Freeze, it seems like Derek Robinson's like, I'm telling my Batman story, and I'm going to tell as much of my Batman story as I want to. So, if you're a huge fan of his, or if you do want a Batman book that has a little bit more variety, you can check out this book this week. Also coming out from Marvel this week, you have the Immortal Hulk, Time of Monsters, number one. And this is another one of the Immortal Hulk one-shots done by different creative teams. This done by Alex Panadale with art by Juan Ferreira. And a big reason I'm excited for this book, I do really like this creative team. For example, this is from the writer who gave us Friendo, which is a series I do really enjoy. It's this twisted take on a future take on Wizard of Oz in a way, but not in a very obvious sense. And then Juan Ferreira is one of my favorite artists currently right now. He's done everything from the recent Thunderbolts book. He also did the Killmonger book. He has a style that's unlike anything else, and I love his page layouts. He's got a really unique language when it comes to the comic book world, so anytime he's on a book, I'm picking it up, and now taking on the Immortal Hulk series. Which I do feel like the Immortal Hulk series, I know a lot of people have been saying this. It's in a lot of reviews that it's not necessarily at the peak it once was, and maybe that's the case. But usually with Immortal Hulk, I think you still tend to get a good issue. It's not at the highest level of when it first started, especially because when it first started, you got more episodic stories, so things felt more complete, and now it's much more decompressed in a way. With these one shots, I feel like you get much more of what it used to be. I love the Jeff Lemire book. The one by Delkin Shelby was also fantastic. So, despite the fact they're just kind of milking the name of Immortal Hulk, it's good milk. So there you go. Milk does the body good, and that's the case with these one shots. It's a really bad joke, and I do apologize, but I do think that this series is something to be excited about. So I really love this creative team. Really excited for this. I almost made this my pick of the week. This is actually a really jam-packed week. A lot of comics I'm really excited about that have a lot of potential, and this is definitely one of them. Also coming out this week from Marvel Comics, we have Shang-Chi #1, hot off the heels of the recent Shang-Chi trailer. So if you got excited for that, it's like, I want to read more Shang-Chi, and you're not sure where to start, now you have a new series. This, once again, is written by Jing Lang, who did the book last year, Shang-Chi. So this does seem to tie into that. So if you've not read that, you might be a little lost. I will say I did like that book. It was good enough, not to diminish the shit, but I thought it was a good way of introducing the character. It did tie into his past, but as someone who is a relative novice to the character, I was able to read it and understand it, and I thought it did a good job of kind of expanding about who the character was and maybe making him a new status quo to kind of build on, which this issue will then continue. A big focus on that was his relationship with his sister. This now is incorporating other Marvel Universe characters are coming out and apparently trying to take Shang-Chi down because he's kind of part of this criminal underground. It's hard to explain without ruining it, but I will say that that's exciting, seeing Shang-Chi take on other Marvel characters, maybe really show what he has as a character. And I'm glad that people tend to have mixed reactions to the way that movies impact what goes on inside the books of Marvel and DC, like how they tend to write them towards the movies. Like Tony Stark feels very much like Robert Downey Jr. In some of the comics, but I think one of the benefits is when you're now getting some of these characters that have not been a mainstay in the Marvel Universe for some time. Now we're getting serious about them, and now and maybe the Eternals and things of that nature. So seeing more variety, allowing books like this to exist, and maybe be a bigger mainstay than they were a few years ago. So there's some positives to that. How good it will be, I don't know, but I think if it's as consistent as the last series, it'll be a fun little read, a good read to kind of whet the appetite for the movie, and that hopefully comes out relatively soon. The last #1 we're going to talk about this week is Red Room #1, and I feel a little odd talking about this because I've already read it, because it's already available digitally. I didn't realize there would be so much a difference between the digital release and the physical release. So if you watched my top 10 a few weeks ago, it was actually in my top 10. It was #2 for that week. So I've already read it. Obviously, I liked it. But now it's coming out to your local comic book shops. And this is written and drawn by Ed Piskor, of course, of the cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube fame, and did, of course, other books like Hip Hop Family Tree, X-Men Grand Design. And now this is a brand new book based upon his own idea. It's about murder on the dark web for fun and profit. And as I said, as someone who read it, there is murder, like hardcore death murder in this. It's not for the faint of heart. It's brutal to watch if you like those movies like Saw, but I think it's even more intense in a way. I feel like I don't love that torture porn-esque style typically when it comes to film, but for whatever reason, when it came to the comic book world, maybe just because of the stylized look of it, it doesn't necessarily feel, it's not like it's delving into realism per se. I was able to enjoy it. It's a very abrasive book. It's very brash. Not to give a review of it here, but if you do like that type of style, there's unlike anything else. It is like 84 pages. It's basically a graphic novel. It's a complete story. Each issue is going to be its own thing, so you can pick up any issue at any time. If your local store does not have it, you can order it directly from Fantagraphics. At least you could have at the time of this video. That may have changed, but they're pretty good at restocking things, or when it's eventually released on trade. Or as I mentioned, you can also already get it on digital if you so choose. Now that we talked about new number ones, let's move over to the world of ongoing series starting new arcs. And there actually are not a lot this week, just a few books that are finally coming back, starting with We Only Find Them When They're Dead, number 6. This is back from hiatus, is now hitting the shelves once again. And I will say this is a book I dropped off of. It just was not clicking with me. It was an interesting premise. I think there's a lot of people who did love it. It was written by Al Ewing, and of course of Immortal Hulk fame, about this space exploration with people and trying to find these ancient gods, and they're always dead, and they mine them for different resources, and they're trying to find one that's alive. Now with this issue, it does flash forward many years into the future. So I am someone interested in going back and just trying to jump on board and seeing maybe if it worked for me now. Even though I stopped at issue 3 or 4, so I might be a little bit lost, but seeing it take place in the future, let's see what happens. But if you have been enjoying this book and you've been wondering where it is or if it's coming back, do know that this issue is out. The first volume is available, so if it is something that you're at all interested in, the first volume came out a few weeks ago. If you want to read that and you enjoy it and you want to continue it, issue 6 will be out this week. Also coming out this week is Stillwater number 7. But yes, this book is finally coming back. It's been a while since this hit shelves. This, of course, is written by Chip Zdarsky. This is a story about a town where no one dies. The book started off with focusing on this one character that went back home, and now it's kind of expanded out even further. The last few issues dealt with a town meeting where there was an explosion, and there's a lot of internal politics that are happening regarding, should this town expose itself, and making people aware of it exists, what exactly should happen. And it's kind of been driving a lot of people in different directions. And the way the last book ended, it seems like things are getting relatively violent in this Stillwater town. Will this be a good starting point for someone who's never read the book before? My guess is probably not, but the first volume is out, so if you want to check it out. Also, if you're a person that has been following this series, sometimes it's hard to remember when books are coming back, so I just wanted to point it out. So if you're interested and you want to continue, know you'll get a new issue this week. The last ongoing book starting a new arc this week is Star Wars Bounty Hunters number 12, and this is tying into the Bounty Hunters storyline, the new crossover that is kind of already began and is going to be going into October. I enjoyed the first issue, the alpha that came out a few weeks ago, in large part due to Steve McNiffin's art. I am extremely apprehensive, wondering how well this is going to be able to hold itself up. And it's all about trying to find Carbonite Frozen Han. It's a long journey to go on for a story where we know how it ends. But if it can keep up the energy in the style of the first issue, maybe that'll be the case. And I do wonder how much is it really going to be impacting these books, because this first issue seems to be dealing with other side plots outside of just that. So this may not be extremely welcoming to new readers. The last issue I did do a review on, it was part of my countdown, and I did like it, trying to survive boss, trying to kill him. So that was a cool little one shot, and now it's getting into the main storyline of this gigantic crossover. So I don't know. I would say enter at your own risk. If you have been following this Bounty Hunter storyline and want to get every issue, that will be the issue coming out this week, and then let me know what you think of it. Like I said, I'm gonna try it at least to start off with, and we'll see how it goes from there. Now that we talked about ongoing series starting new arcs, let's move over to the world of trade paperbacks and graphic novels, starting with We Hereby Refuse, Japanese Americans' Refusal to Wartime Incarceration. And this is, of course, about the wartime incarceration that occurred to Japanese Americans during World War II, where they put into basically concentration camps and held there due to American fears of them kind of turning on them during this time. And I'm really interested in seeing how it approaches this. I read the They Called Me Enemy book by George Takei a few years ago, and that was a remarkable book, and it was really eye-opening, not only to George Takei's life, but just that event in general, because again, it's one of those things that we kind of talk about existing, but we don't necessarily go into the finer details all that much, and getting a first-hand account of that was impactful. And this graphic novel, We Hereby Refuse, is about those that refuse to go down that journey, and it's separated into 3 separate stories, and it's a combination of different creators and artists. I'm excited about this in large part because I do love graphic novels that focus on history in some important way, and of course this is that. And I've read about the camps that existed, but I've not necessarily heard a lot about those that refused to go and the acts that they went through. So getting three separate stories about different individuals that have really not been talked about nearly enough in a comic book format, again, to me, just shows the importance of comics, how it can shine a light on a lot of things outside of the fact that we're going to get 8,000 Batman books. We'll also get books like this that also play a very key role to the evolution of the comic book medium. On the omnibus format, we have Superman by Peter Tajamasi and Patrick Gleason coming out this week, and this is focused on the Superman Rebirth run that established itself a few years ago. And actually, I really love this run, at least the majority of it. It was one of the best Superman stories we've got in some time. It's really what established the relationship between Jonathan Kent and Clark Kent, like seeing him in this role as a dad and how that evolved. I really missed this series. I've not read it in some time. It was during a time when I was really getting into comics again at a high level, and this to me was a one of the best Rebirth books. And I know a lot of people had issues because this ended when Bendis came in, although I feel like near the end of the run, after the first year and a half, 2 years, it was running a little thin. So that's why I'm not necessarily super interested in the entire run, because I didn't have the same admiration for the end as I did the beginning. But maybe if I went back and reread it all over again, I'll change my mind. Plus, it also, again, does look fantastic because it has art by Patrick Gleason. But if you did love this run, because I know a lot of people did, or at least a lot of people said they did when they heard Bendis was taking it over and were angry that they were ruining one of the best Superman runs of all time, or whatever, as people tend to be when things happen. But now it's an omnibus format, and it'll be hitting shelves this week. Out this week from Scout Comics is Sengi and Tempo trade paperback, and this is part of the Scout Comics Scoot line. And I actually read the first issue of this series of, I don't even know, a few months ago, and I liked it. And what Scout Comics does, especially for their Scoot line, is that they release the first issue, so you get a little taste. It's like $2.99, so it's a little bit cheaper. But they don't release issue number 2. They'll wait for you to buy the entire graphic novel. So I am interested in now reading the entire story. It is more kid-based. It's about this elephant and mouse in Africa that start a friendship. So your classic folktale, fairy tale type of storyline. And I thought the first issue, despite the fact that it was like a smaller issue, a part of a bigger graphic novel, gave me a good sense of the characters, the conflict, and it was like an extended preview in a way. And the artwork's pretty solid as well. So if you're also interested in a book that's more kid friendly, and there's not a lot this week I was able to find, but this is one of the better examples of them. So again, it's a trade paperback. If you're interested in maybe trying it out like I did, again, you can try issue number 1 for a little bit of a price and get an idea of what it's like. And if you want to try more, now you'll be able to get the entire trade paperback this week. Also coming out this week is Aliens Omnibus, the early years from Marvel, and now that they have this huge catalog of Aliens comics they now own due to Disney buying up everything, they're now releasing it in different formats. Now, getting a bunch of the early years, putting it in one collection. So if you're a huge Aliens fan, if you enjoy those books, I will say Minutia Minute YouTube channel has been going through and did a great video on some of the early year Alien comics. So if you don't want to spend all the money on one omnibus but want to read some of the earlier comics, I found that very helpful. I've not read a lot of Alien content, mostly the stuff that's come out in the last 5 to 6 years. I really loved the book that was done by James Stokoe a few years ago, Alien Dead Orbit, I believe, and it kind of was in the same vein as classic Alien, where you got people on a space station trying to avoid this one alien, and with James Stokoe's art, which is always great to look at. As I mentioned, Minutia Minute did a really good insightful video a few weeks ago about a lot of the early Aliens comics when it was released by Dark Horse. So if you want a more intense guide about what books existed, what books you can pick up, maybe you don't want to spend all the money on an omnibus, you can check that out. But if you are interested, or you maybe just like everything in one complete package and you love omnibuses, you'll be able to get this book this upcoming Wednesday. Also coming out this week from Image Comics is Home Six Pilots. This is written by Dan Walters with art by Casper Wingard, and this is a book that I had high hopes for. I know a lot of people really did like this series. It just did not click with me per se. It's a different take on the haunted house genre. I actually found myself enjoying the general drama bits about them in school, and also different takes on things like punk rock and fun bits like that, where the supernatural element, I don't know, it didn't necessarily have the impact I want. I'm a huge fan of Dan Walters as a writer. I like a lot of the stuff he does, but sometimes things don't work for you, and that was the case with this book. But maybe if I read it in one complete setting, I'll change my mind. I do know a lot of people did love it. If you do love the horror genre, you can now check it out. It's not over. This is just the first volume. New issues are scheduled to be coming out soon. So if you wanted to be able to kind of read it and see if you do like it before those new issues are released, you can check out the first volume now this Wednesday. The last trade paperback I'm going to talk about this week is Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. This is from the 2019-2020 series from Jody Houser and art by Adrienne Mello, and this is a book I completely missed, to be honest with you. Harley Quinn is one of those characters I can technically take or leave. I actually do really love the HBO Max series. I didn't think I would like it. I didn't love the first episode. It felt a little bit too brash to be brash. Like, hey, look, we're cursing, but as things went on, I ended up loving it. Ron Funches is King Shark forever. But with this series, I know the combination of Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn tend to lead to really great things, like with the TV show. So maybe I'll go back and give it a shot. Like, I've not read it. I do like a lot of Jody Houser's past works, so that has me excited. The art does look pretty well. I don't know the artist all that much, but obviously they're huge fans of both of these characters, especially when they're together. And I get why. Even way back when they first really partnered up in the Batman animated series many eons ago, it worked, and they've been utilizing that partnership ever since. So if you're a huge fan of the series, I'd be interested in hearing it. I feel like I've heard nothing about it for some reason, and I guess there are a lot of comics, so that's bound to happen. So that's why I also wanted to pick it up and let people know about it, because if you missed out on it like I did, you'll know it'll be coming out this week. All right, so we talked about ongoing series starting new arcs, notable number ones, trade paperbacks, and graphic novels. Now it's time to talk about the thing I'm most excited about, my pick of the week. All right, when it came to this week, like I said, there were a lot of books I could have chosen. I almost went with Wonder Girl. I almost went with a Immortal Hulk one-shot. But when I looked at everything, the book I'm most excited about is Fantastic Four Life Story #1. And why is that? A number of reasons. I did really like Spider-Man Life Story. I thought it took an idea of superheroes aging, and it did fun stuff with it, interesting stuff, and taking the idea of aging heroes and utilizing that to also touch upon classic storylines, also incorporating things like historical events like Vietnam, seeing this entire thing play out almost like an extended What If issue. And now we're getting that with Fantastic Four. And I think it actually makes a lot of sense, especially being kind of the team that helped relaunch what Marvel is now, back in the 60s. And now how is that going to tie into, I'm guessing the space race, other key elements. There's obviously a lot of drama within the Fantastic Four. And it did seem like when you were reading Spider-Man Life Story that they were also creating like an entire new universe, because it had spin-offs with Iron Man and Captain America. And my guess is this will be something the same. Also, this is written by Mark Russell, who is one of my favorite writers right now. Anytime his name is on a book, I'm going to check it out. And putting that idea of him writing Fantastic Four, tying it to historical events, letting him the freedom to kind of not have to worry about anything like continuity, and having him take on a team like this, there's a lot of potential there. He's written some Marvel book. The book he did for Captain America, The Snapshot, last year, I thought was great. It was a great kind of offshoot of that character. And now we're seeing him take on another main Marvel character. Mostly he's done DC work and stuff for Dynamite and Ahoy. I'm all more excited to see him take on bigger and more notable characters like the Fantastic Four. The artists I don't have a lot of experience with, though I don't necessarily can speak to that. I did look at the preview pages. They look pretty good. They look solid. Nothing something that's going to make me super excited about the book, but all the other elements that I talked about is really why I'm most excited about it. Really, when I heard this was going to be a thing, I'm like, okay, I know when I'm doing my starting points video, that's going to be the most excited book of the week, most likely. And that was the case. And of course, here we are talking about it now. But I'm excited for comics this week. There's a lot of what you're looking out for outside of new series and ongoing series. So if you're curious to hear more of my thoughts about it, I'll be doing my top 10. I try to release that around Saturdays or Sundays, so you can check that out. You can check out my last top 10 that came out a few days ago. But I do want to thank you for taking the time to check out my video. I appreciate that. And just remember, comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, keep reading.